This is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and I've done a few videos the last couple of days why I'm no longer affiliated with the church. That has been viewed by people who have found that favorable. And then I've done another one about Mormons being Antichrist, and that's only been viewed by those who don't find it favorable. So this one is going to be about why I'm critical of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You must understand, I was born and raised in the LDS Church. My parents both served LDS missions, and my dad went to Japan, my mom went to Eastern Canada, and so I was raised as an Orthodox Mormon, if we can utilize terms from other religions. As a child, I recognized a similarity with the Joseph Smith story. Joseph Smith's first vision involved him being familiar with multiple religions and confused as to which church to join, because each church were saying different interpretations about the same scripture from the New Testament. And Joseph Smith was confused as to which one to believe, and therefore be a part of that religious organization. As a Mormon, I exclusively went to the LDS Church, and yet sacrament meeting after sacrament meeting, Sunday school after Sunday school, priesthood after priesthood, and as a boy we go through deacons, teachers, and priests quorums, and seminary after seminary. I was a graduate of early morning seminary, but every person in the church got up and would talk about the same passage of scripture. And we have the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price in addition to the Bible. And yet people were declaring different doctrinal views and interpretations within the same church. The church produces manuals for everybody in the world to utilize the same manuals, so that the same lesson is being taught everywhere in the world. Seminary, it's the same lessons. And, that should take care of the discrepancies in doctrinal beliefs, but it doesn't. Even though having a formatted lessons causes tremendous problems, where you end up censoring other material, excluding it from the lessons, so that other material can never be discussed or implemented in the lesson. And the church excludes extra quad scriptures. We utilize Egyptian scriptures in the Book of Abraham, but the church does not approve of going to other Egyptian scriptures, because only the Book of Abraham has been approved as being canon, and that causes some great problems. But as a child, everybody was talking about a different doctrine, and as a child I was confused. But I took the flyer that we got from sacrament meeting and wrote down the differences. Every time somebody talked about a doctrine, I wrote it down. And when after I graduated, I looked at the pile that I had and sorted it out, and had a big enough pile that I decided to make a book about it, and that became Philosophy of Mormonism. Mormons need to understand that people are not free to believe whatever they want. That does not establish truth. Majority opinion does not establish truth. There's always been conflict between Utah Mormons and California Mormons. California Mormons have seen themselves as more understanding of the doctrine, whereas Utah Mormons were viewed as ultra-right conservative and unwavering in mercy to fellow man. And so California Mormons would come home from their trip to Utah and talk about how horrible they were treated by the Utah Mormons. And then Utah Mormons see themselves as superior, elite, chosen above all other Mormons. And I would just refer them to the Zoramite story in the Book of Abraham, or Book of Mormon, sorry. So I nevertheless stuck with the church my whole life. I went through the priesthoods. Early morning seminary, as I mentioned, went to Rick's College, served a mission to New York, New York, came home, married my first wife in the Cardston, Alberta Temple, where she took me to Canada to go to school and get my education there and have free babies. America could learn a lot from the economy of Canada. To pay for health care is absurd. Millions upon millions of women have had free babies. And yet, here in America, we charge people to have a baby. And then you get into the abortion controversy and whether or not a woman is allowed to have an abortion. And of course, she has to pay for an abortion. And it's ugly. But that gets me off topic. Although not too far off topic, because Utah is an anti-abortion state. And that's because of the Mormon culture that dominates the government. You can't have government being controlled by religion. It just causes way too many problems. But married, had kids, continued in the church, attended Institute while I was up in Canada, and was dedicated to studying the scriptures, not just the Bible, but the whole quad of the Mormons, and took Hebrew up at the University of Lethbridge, and tried to figure out how Joseph Smith rendered his translation of the Hebrew text of the Bible from his King Follett Discourse, and discovered the origins of Hebrew as a result, Paleo-Hebrew I call it, and figured out that Joseph Smith's translation was correct, despite all other scholars who said he was wrong. My education at the University of Lethbridge taught me how to develop theories and do research independent of my faith, my born and raised church. So my theory is sound, but I was a defender of Joseph Smith, more so than the Mormon apologists. I became a church service missionary for the curriculum department, involved in altering the footnotes to conform to the Guide to the Scriptures for the foreign language translations of the Quad. And that was because of my pursuit to find more information from the church on King Follett Discourse. The church, F. Michael Watson, the secretary for President Hinckley, tried to have me excommunicated when I went and asked if there were more information. He had a troublemaker file made, and the first file that was put in that troublemaker file was my initial hypothesis of the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. So it seems kind of strange that they would call me a troublemaker for defending Joseph Smith. So again, why is the church that I was born and raised into and loyal to causing problems? That's not a good sign, and that again causes troubles for me. If you want people to be loyal to you, you got to be loyal to them. If you're not loyal to them, they won't be loyal to you. That's a basic philosophy of life. But I still believed in Joseph Smith, and so I stuck with the church. And then my kids got kidnapped, and my local bishop aided and abetted in that kidnapping. And the Utah government did nothing to help me. And I went to the church, and they did nothing on the matter other than to grant my ex a temple ceiling cancellation. And so that was also discouraging, that the church would not assist me in restoring and keeping my children. And instead, they helped pay the lifestyle of my ex. She had custody of my kids illegally and fled the country to Canada, where she was from. So that's very disturbing. And it's not just one thing. A person who is dedicated and loyal to a church, it has to be something that keeps building and building and building. And when and so bishops refused to give me assistance where they were giving my first ex assistance. I had a bishop who in the singles ward here in Utah, I got fed up with the women of Utah. They told me I had to stick with my own kind, and that's not a good thing to say to a guy. So I went back to the family ward, but I couldn't really embrace the family ward because the bishop who was involved in the kidnapping of my kids was now elevated to counselor in the stake presidency. And so, being a victim of abuse, you don't want to stand out. And so the singles ward bishop took it upon himself to say, Travis isn't coming to church, we're taking away his recommend. I had been going to the temple daily, every single day, doing something, even if it was just an initiatory. The people at the Jordan River Temple knew me because I was there every day. They had hope for the future of the church because of me, because I was going every day. And to have them find out that my temple recommend is confiscated by a bishop who wanted control and power over somebody who was no longer going to his ward, who had gone to a family ward where he was not welcome either. You know, again, it adds up. The abuse cannot be done by members of the church, and yet it happens to millions of us. And then I got arrested because I petitioned the government one more time to get my kids back. And they wanted me silenced. They did not like me bothering them on that issue. And I was arrested as a terrorist and put in the mental hospital. Just like Abinadi was accused of being a threat to the king and mad. Not mad as in angry, mad as in insane. That is the typical accusation of abuse of power. They say that the person is a threat and that they are insane, crazy, mentally ill. And that's what Utah did. I predicted that they were so abusive that I put it in my petition for redressing grievances. And they fell right into it. They didn't even care, because they were going to remove me from society and have me silenced for the rest of my life. And I was freed, miraculously, 6 years later. And I knew that certain things had to be acquired, and I came back to the church and made sure that I got my temple recommend and was going back to the temple every single day. And then I moved to a different location and showed up to the new ward and was given numerous callings. I think I counted 7 or 8 at one time, and was very dedicated to the ward and to the community, the neighborhood. And then the bishop turned on me. He threatened me. He wanted me silenced. I was promoting the Book of Mormon as the official doctrine of the church. And he didn't like that, because the doctrine has changed in Utah for the church. It's no longer the Book of Mormon that is the official doctrine. It is the living prophet. Not the dead prophets, the living prophet. Once a prophet dies, all of his words are null and void in the minds of the Mormons. It's weird to witness, to watch the hypocrisy in church. You know, we were forced to study the teachings of the prophets. And then Monson, his turn came up, and he died right in the beginning of the year. It would have been a perfect year to be studying his words, and yet they stopped. No more were we going to talk about dead prophets, and we were only going to do the words from conference. And gospel doctrines are now opinion discussions. No more are we going to the scriptures. And the church is changing for the worse. We don't study the apostasy. We talk about it on our missions, but we don't talk about it in church. And the key to understanding our future is understanding the past. We cannot tell people that we are a restoration church if we do not understand the apostasy and the need for a restoration in the first place. And we're doomed to repeat the past if we do not learn from it. And that's what's happening. The church is repeating the same exact conditions after Jesus and the apostles were murdered. But I was no longer allowed in church because the bishop threatened me to be silent. And so I decided at that point, I'm going to study church history. I'm going to get it out of the way. I've been studying the scriptures. I know the scriptures better than any Mormon and any non-Mormon. I know the Old Testament better than Jews. I know the New Testament better than Christians. I know Mormon doctrine better than Mormons. But I didn't know church history fully. And so I did. And again, when you research something, you don't take one side's viewpoint, because there are gaps in the church's version. You go to the canonized version of church history, and right away, Joseph Smith says he has parents. Well, what about his parents? Where did they come from? Joseph Smith says he was born in Vermont, so his parents were in Vermont. How did that happen? What were they doing? What church did they go to in Vermont? Because they went to churches in Palmyra. And so what about Vermont? Those questions are not disclosed in the church. They do not talk about it in the manuals or in any of the books. And definitely not in seminary and institute. So I had to do the research myself to find out what's going on. And that opened my eyes. I had had enough with the bishop trying to silence me. That was the final straw. But then I learned the truth, and everything fit into place. I now understood why members of the church were abusive, why the leaders of the church were passing their responsibility to teach the doctrines to the members, to the stake presidents. And it all came to Brigham Young. All the missing information about Brigham Young and his life in connection with the coming forth of the Book of Mormon and the rise of the church, the organization of the church, all of it fit. And I understood exactly. Brigham Young had no authority. He was a traveling 12. He took it upon himself to excommunicate Thomas B. Marsh, the president of the traveling 12. It wasn't Joseph Smith. It wasn't over spilled milk of his wife. And so, that opened my eyes. And I saw that the church fell into apostasy with the murder of Joseph and Hiram. And that is why I'm critical of the church that I was born and raised in, the church that I was loyal to, the church whose founder I defended. The church whose founder's work I confirmed as valid. The Mormon apologists won't verify that Joseph Smith's Book of Abraham translations are accurate. I'm the one who figured it out. By using the same research technology or techniques that I used in Paleo-Hebrew, I used with Egyptian. And I found out that the Egyptian glyphs, not just the text writing, the glyphs, the pictures that accompany text, they also need to be translated. And when you understand that a single Egyptian character represents many different concepts and ideas because of the different stories that they are referred to in the text material, you then realize that there is a lot going on with a single picture. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, a picture is also worth 1,000 sentences, maybe even paragraphs. And so all that understanding had kept me in the church, but the abuse, that I don't want any part of the church anymore. You can't be abusive. You can't violate God's law. You can't violate God's will and claim that you are His church, that you are listening to Him. Jesus does not approve of kidnapping. Jesus does not approve of taking away temple recommends from people who are going to the temple every day. Jesus does not approve of discrimination. He does not approve of locking babies in cages. That's what Trump is doing, and Mormons approve of it. Jesus does not approve of raping women and letting the men go free because we don't want to ruin their lives. Jesus does not approve of being sexually explicit to kids in interviews with the bishop. Jesus does not approve of everything that the church is involved in. Members of the church get up month after month in fast and testimony meeting, and they give their rote prayer testimony. Mormons don't even know what a testimony is. They don't even understand that it's not faith. Testimony is knowledge. Testimony is proof. It is evidence. It is fruit from a seed. A seed is the word that we must have faith in. Mormons don't comprehend this, and it's right smack in the middle of the Book of Mormon. Mormons do not know their doctrine, and they're being silenced because 1993 President Packer had the church history BYU professors excommunicated and fired because they uncovered evidence that contradicted the church's claim to the church history. And so an anti-intellectual movement began, the dumbing down of Mormons. And now Mormons just spout the ad hominems, the little catchphrases similar to Trump, crooked Hillary. Mormons have their own little things of hatred and spite for those who try to point out the truth, try to point out the errors in Mormonism. Mormons are, if they even bothered to listen to this video, they're going to be putting all sorts of thumbs down. You can tell who it is who's putting thumbs up or thumbs down on my videos. Mormons are the thumbs down. Anti-Mormons are the thumbs up. And there shouldn't be an anti-Mormon, because there shouldn't be a Mormon who's corrupt. There shouldn't be a Mormon who's abusive. You know, they don't even understand logical argument. They can't distinguish it from fallacy that they utilize every day to justify staying in their religion. For me, I stayed all these decades because I pursued the truth and found out that Joseph Smith was right about his King Follett Discourse and the Book of Abraham. And I found that the doctrine that he presented was true. But the church is not doing what Joseph Smith presented. It's a complete turnaround, a reversal of what he established. And Brigham Young is the key to that. He had no authority, but he took it upon himself to be one of those splinter groups and ended up being the successful one out of all of the other splinter groups. So here we are in 2018. We have a government that's collapsing according to prophecy. We have a church that is in apostasy according to prophecy. And where are the Mormons? If it's not God's church because God does not approve of what's going on in it, then whose church do you think it is? Who is influencing the decisions, the policies, the practices, the doctrines? Give you a hint, it's Lucifer. The church needs to be restored. The temple needs to be restored. We need to stop the Freemasonry symbolisms. We need to go back to the Egyptian symbolisms, the Egyptian order. That's the original order. That's the order that is in the Old Testament. That is the order that is in the Gospels. That's what I've discovered. The Bible is taken from Egyptian documents, the Egyptian religion. And that's how Joseph Smith was accurate. Because the story of Abraham came from the Egyptian documents. So the Book of Abraham is right on target for Joseph Smith. But nobody caught that, and everybody shot him down. So, yeah, that's why I'm critical of the church. Contend against no church, but the church of the devil. That is the policy in the Book of Mormon. And that is what I adhere to. I will work to restore the true church of Jesus. It's that simple. Choose ye this day whom ye will serve.